Hello, and thank you for taking the time to learn more about the Gateway Area Plan, proposal for balancing transportation modes with an emphasis on bike and ped safety, as well as what is proposed for new and enhanced bike and multi-use trail facilities. I'm David Loya, the Director of Community Development for the City of Arcata, and I'm pleased to share this information with you today. Please feel free to reach out to me or my team if you have any follow-up questions, and as always, let the City Council and Planning Commission know your thoughts as well. Let's begin. In this video, I'm going to discuss the reason for the proposal, what's actually being proposed. I'll cover the alternatives that were considered when developing the proposal, and lastly, why staff and our consulting transportation engineers ultimately landed on the proposals that are presented in this presentation. We're going to start by looking at what is actually being proposed and why. I'm going to jump right into the content. But if you need a refresher on what the Gateway Area Plan is, the boundaries, or why the undertaking is happening in the first place, please visit our YouTube channel with the search term Gateway to learn more about these topics. You can also learn more on our website by searching Arcata and Gateway. I want to start by reviewing the purpose as stated in the plan. The purpose was developed through community feedback as well as current best practices for trail and transportation planning. We also use modern transportation planning principles that emphasize reducing vehicle miles traveled and making modes of travel, whether on foot or by wheel, feel safe and comfortable on new roads and trails we're planning. The city is growing. We need to plan for that growth to make sure the infrastructure can continue to support and to enhance the high quality of life Arcatans have come to enjoy. Specifically, we want to plan to continue to support a robust network of bicycle, pedestrian, and transit that's balanced with vehicular infrastructure to ensure that folks using all modes feel safe. The plan seeks to improve the current condition for people using the sidewalks, bike lanes, and multi-use trails. To that end, the strategy proposes to realign the road network to make safety a priority on existing roads while expanding the current trail infrastructure. I want to take a moment to address a misconception about the proposal here and to emphasize that the multi-use trails, including the Bay Trail North, which is part of the California Coastal Trail and which is planned to extend to the Annie and Mary Trail, will remain intact and in place. The plan does call for a minor realignment of the northern section of the L Street segment of this trail to improve user safety and enjoyment. We'll take a closer look at that in a moment. Looking at the proposed language of the Planning Commission recommended to the City Council regarding the planned circulation network and trails specifically, Planning Commission and committees recommended the transportation system emphasize alternative modes over vehicles in policy GA7A. The Commission went on to recommend no net loss of the Class 1 trail system. These are the multimodal trails you see along Foster to L Street and out to the Bay Trail. So no net loss of these trails. The policy and strategy are generally depicted in figures 8 and 9 of the plan. Figure 8 shows the planned vehicular circulation network emphasizing the proposed changes. And figure 9 on the right shows the existing and planned alternative modes of transportation, including bike and ped trails. Let's take a closer look at the trails first. This image depicts the Gateway area and surrounding areas slightly grayed out with the existing facilities, multi-use path, class 2, 3, and class 2 and 3 bike routes and bike lanes depicted in the solid lines. You'll note in the center of the field of view is L Street. The L Street corridor is our current existing multi-use path. That's a class 1 trail. The proposed facilities are shown in dashed lines in these figures. I want to draw your attention to the number of new class 1 separated multi-use trails that are proposed. Notably N as in Nancy Street, which connects to the west side of the Creamery District, is proposed to be extended from Alliance near Shea Park to Samoa along or near the existing rail corridor. The precise location of these trails will be determined in pre-development planning. Other multi-use trail locations include along Q Street and the connection of L and N streets with the N Street Trail. The northern section of L Street multi-use trail may need to be relocated to continue to provide the same separated trail experience in the future if the L Street is extended. This relocation is proposed to start near the 10th and L Street intersection, where the trail currently jogs to the east of the rail onto L Street. The trail would be relocated to the west side of the tracks or on top of the tracks to provide a larger buffer from the traffic on L Street if L Street were turned into a one-way southbound couplet. This is important for the public to understand. Some have been confused that the proposal eliminates the multi-use trail along L Street. In fact, the trail will be improved and the overall system will be greatly expanded by the proposed plan. The plan emphasizes a walkable, bikeable, and high quality of life vision for the Gateway area. Now that we've looked at the trail system and understand that no trails are being eliminated and that the plan proposes the addition of several new trails and bike lanes, let's take a look at the proposed road systems. The road systems are going to have to adjust from their current configurations to accommodate these new trails and to create the types of improvements in safety that we're seeking. Okay, so zooming in on that map and putting into the context of the larger area in this aerial image. The plan proposes to continue the one-way couplets in the downtown on 8th and 9th Streets to connect the Creamery District with the downtown. These roads will enhance walking and biking experience and reduce the drive lanes considerably, emphasizing these alternative modes. There are several diagrams in the Gateway area plan that you can view on our website to see what's proposed for 8th and 9th Street, but I really want to emphasize and focus on the K and L one-way couplet that's being proposed because it's been the focus of community dialogue to date. Let's start by looking at the existing conditions on K Street. Currently, K Street works well enough for vehicular traffic. There are north and southbound lanes and parking on both sides of the street. While the current level of service, a measure of traffic congestion, does result in some peak flow traffic impacts, these levels are considered acceptable locally. The city has a long history of accepting poor level of service as part of its travel demand management and mode shift strategies. The idea being that folks will use other modes of transportation if vehicular traffic isn't working for them. You'll note, however, that the infrastructure for bikes is not as good as it could be in this image. Currently, the bike lane is shared with the travel lanes for vehicles. That is, there is no designated bike lane. We have painted sharrows to remind drivers that the lanes are intended for bikes as well as cars, but this does not create a comfortable biking experience for even the most experienced riders, compared with separated bike lanes. For pedestrians, the situation is acceptable, but it could be better. There are 5-foot sidewalks on either side of K Street, and the crosswalks are well marked. However, crossing this street requires approximately a 40-foot path of travel across 2 ways of travel lanes and 2 rows of parking. So there could be improvements here. Again, one of our main objectives in updating the mobility network is to enhance the walkability and bikeability while improving the connectivity between downtown and the Gateway area. Currently, to make that transit from downtown to the Gateway area, you have to cross larger crossings with longer pedestrian exposure. And there are several design elements in the proposed plan that help to resolve these concerns. Of note, the 2-way crossing intersections that we have now create several more conflicts that are created by 1-way with 2-way. And you'll note that 1-way intersections reduce even more the number of conflict points between bicycles, pedestrians, and vehicular traffic. Here you see the current on the left and proposed crossings for K and 9th Street. The number of conflicts is greatly reduced here by reducing transit from 2 lanes both ways to 1 lane both ways. Again, this is a very well-designed set of one-way couplets where the number of conflicts is greatly reduced. There are separated bike lanes on both K and 9th Street. Crossings are reduced to a maximum of 24 feet, and the bulb outs and crosswalk design help calm traffic as it approaches these intersections. Let's take a look at what the plan proposes for K Street. From this vantage, you can see that K is proposed as a one-way northbound with either a separated or completely segregated bike lane, wide sidewalks with bulb outs at intersections, and parking on one side and high visibility crosswalks. Let's take a look at a typical cross section. Now this is the plan view and a visual with the rendering of northbound one-way on K Street. By creating one way of travel, you reduce the travel lanes considerably, creating plenty of room for doubling the size of the sidewalks on both sides of the street. So instead of 5-foot sidewalks, we have 10-foot sidewalks planned. There is also added room to create a wide unidirectional bike lane and a buffer. Now this bike lane can be either just separated by that buffer, or we can enhance that separation further and create a full class 4 bike lane here. And this proposal does retain parking on one side. If the plan view and the visualization didn't work for you, looking at the street view, here's another visualization of a typical for K Street. And again, you'll note that the class 4 segregated bike lane is created by elevating the bike lane to the elevation of the sidewalk instead of requiring the bike lane to be on the same level as the road. That creates that segregation. You'll note also the broad sidewalks and one drive lane here. Now let's look at the proposal for L Street. We'll take a look at the alternatives in a moment, but first I want to review the current condition of L Street and what the gateway proposal recommended by the Planning Commission is. Currently, L Street is open between 11th and 7th to local traffic only. There are bollards preventing traffic from entering at 11th Street. The road is open on one small segment north of 11th Street, but it's otherwise impassable by vehicular traffic. This is also where the current location of the L Street portion of the Bay Trail is located. It's concurrent with the road on this segment. This portion of the Bay Trail is, as well as the second segment between 10th and 11th, are actually shared with the road. While this is an extremely low flow, local traffic only portion of L Street, the trail is not technically a class 1 multi-use trail in this segment since it's on the road. The reason I emphasize this is because the gateway proposal does make this segment fully segregated from the road. And so the current experience that you have entering the road and sharing that low flow traffic would be eliminated in the future, and the trail along the entirety of L Street would be completely segregated. Okay, getting back to L Street for a second here, L Street also does not extend south of 7th Street. So there are current gaps in the flow of traffic from L Street, some created by our bollards, others that are just a factor of not having L Street ever been developed on those segments or having been abandoned. On the portions of L Street that are open to vehicular traffic, there are 2 vehicle lanes going north and southbound and 1 parking lane. Let's take a look at what's proposed in the plan. Again, you can see from this vantage that much of the proposal for L Street mirrors the K Street in many ways. There's 1 lane of traffic, southbound this time, broad sidewalks, bulb outs, and high visibility crossings. The one notable difference is the existing multi-use trail remains, and it is enhanced by the gateway proposal. Let's look at the plan more closely. I'm going to zoom in on this plan view. You'll note that this plan view shows the orientation with north up. This would put the Creamery building on the left side, but let's look at this as the plan would be viewed southbound, the way vehicular traffic would flow. So we'll turn that all over. The plan calls for retaining and expanding the public sphere on the west side of the trail to enhance the linear park features that currently exist. Some properties have already contributed to a park-like feel. The Creamery building, for example, has maintained landscaping, benches, public art, all of which have the feeling that that landscaped area, which is actually on private property, is part of the public sphere. The plan calls for expanding and adding to this, requiring developers and property owners to contribute area to the west side of the trail to create that broader linear park feel. Plan proposes retaining the multi-use trail, as I've mentioned earlier, and the vegetative buffer, creating that separation from the travel lane. It does propose to open a single drive lane headed southbound and retain the parking. Lastly, it retains the sidewalk. Let's take a look at what that might look like on L Street south of 8th. You can see here that there's really not much change to the existing physical conditions, some restriping, repaving to touch up the road and that sort of thing. And while this would become a primary southbound road under the Commission's recommended proposal, the road design would emphasize reducing travel speeds through several road design elements, some of which we've already discussed, like narrowing lane widths, bulb outs, and other environmental design elements. So you see here the trail is retained, the buffer zone is retained, one direction of travel instead of two. This would be through traffic, not just local traffic, parking, and then sidewalk. Looking again, image from L and 9th, here's another way of thinking about it. The existing travel lanes would be converted to one-way, southbound with a parking lane next to it. You'd keep the vegetative buffer, the trail, the separation, and the sidewalk. I want to close out this review of images by looking at, again, the L Street typical design. This is included in our Gateway Area Plan. Showing the planting strip starting from the left to right, planting strip that would be on the west side of the trail, separated vegetative buffer, drive lane, parking lane, and then the sidewalk. I want to note that we're talking about retaining a Class 1 trail, not a Class 4 protected two-way bikeway, and so that will remain a multi-use trail. It would not be converted to a bikeway. This wraps up the discussion on the proposal, and I hope this helped explain the relationship between the trail, the bike lane, sidewalk improvements that are designed to improve user safety and comfort, and the proposed redesign for vehicular traffic as proposed in the Gateway Area Plan. I also hope it's clear that the city is not proposing to remove any multi-use trails, and to the contrary, the proposal is to improve the trail network, adding several multi-use trails and several bike lanes. Now let's take a look at the alternatives that were considered before settling on the K&L Street couplet to accomplish this alternative transportation goals of the community. Again, the purpose is to create a safer, more balanced in terms of travel mode and intuitively connected downtown and gateway area. I'm going to focus on the K&L couplet exclusively and the alternatives there for this discussion. For alternatives to be effective, they would need to accomplish several mutual goals. First, the alternative needed to meet the safety and convenience goals for alternative modes of travel. We've seen the intersection improvements, road width reductions, sidewalk widths, increases, and other features that create safety and convenience for bikes and peds previously. Any alternative that we evaluated and recommended had to retain these. Second, the alternative would need to support the infrastructure. This may seem like it goes without saying, but there are lots of routes that have been proposed that actually won't support the infrastructure ultimately that we need to build out this safer future. Next, the vehicular routing needed to be efficient and effective. Now, some have drawn criticism against this because they say we should not be focusing on the efficiency of vehicular traffic. But the efficiency in terms of a couplet is affected by the different distance between the north and southbound segments. And if the planned routing becomes too convoluted or too distant, then people will choose non-planned routes, which create traffic and safety impacts that were unintended. And so for this reason, we wanted to make sure that vehicular routing was at least efficient enough to retain the effectiveness of that couplet and make sure that people took the planned routes that were established in the plan. Lastly, the route needed to be feasible. Some alternatives would require demolition, of several private buildings, for example, acquisition of easements, and etc. The selected alternative needed to be practicable in addition to possible. So with these primary principles in mind, and with the goals of alternative transportation safety, the city's consulting traffic engineers and city staff evaluated several routes. These were ultimately vetted by the Planning Commission, and the Commission recommended the L and K Street couplet proposed in the Gateway Area Plan. But let's review the routes that were vetted. First, we could take a look at a nearby southbound alternative to L Street, M Street, M as in Mary. This option does have some coastal wetlands that would have to be filled to execute it. It also overlaps with planned open space, and the fact that several private easements and demolition of buildings that are existing and housing businesses would have to be demolished to build out this roadway. And there would be significant reductions in the development potential of key opportunity sites in the plan area. And so for these reasons, we found M Street to be less attractive an option from L Street and did not recommend that one. We could scoot the couplet to the west a little ways and make the couplet fall on N as in Nancy Street. That could also be paired with a portion of an M Street, since M is already open. That would lead to reduced paving from a full N Street alternative. This alternative has some of the same cons of the M Street southbound. In addition, because the distance and circuity, the N Street is likely to lead to cheaters following these unplanned routes, creating those unintended consequences that we talked about earlier. We evaluated the possibility of routing southbound traffic along 11th Street to Q Street, and then it would exit onto Samoa Boulevard. This also has some of the same cons that were discussed before. There is a roadbed on Q Street, so it's possible and practical, but the distance would lead to even more cheaters, in particular for folks who are trying to get to 101. If they were driving southbound and had to drive all the way over to Q Street, chances are good they would go through downtown instead to get there. Q and O have similar features. Oak Street is a possible alternative that was also similarly rejected because it's not as supportive of those goals and principles as L Street. Now, I do want to take a look at J Street with a little bit more attention. J Street was considered an alternative early on, and it would accomplish many of the goals and is a fairly attractive option from a mobility standpoint. The J Street option would affect more than twice the number of current residences, however, and it's not a commercial corridor or planned one. And it would likely create more cross traffic seeking to get from J Street to the Gateway compared with L Street, which is located in the planned activity center already. Notwithstanding, J is a viable alternative to L for a couplet. There are other ideas that have been raised that were not further evaluated because either they didn't meet the principles outlined above and the alternative transportation safety goals, or because they were variations on the theme that we've already evaluated. For instance, one alternative suggested was to make K a one-way northbound and to not designate a southbound couplet to K, letting individual drivers decide which route to take. We did not explore this further because this we viewed as planning for unplanned routing and would necessarily lead to those unintended consequences. So there were several alternatives that are not discussed here further that you may have heard discussed in the public discussion thus far, but this is where I will end our alternatives analysis. We did discuss alternatives to improving K Street. Staff provided several options for modifying K Street, and these options were evaluated primarily because the timing on L Street development is unknown. And so K Street will likely have to serve in the near term while L is being, either easements acquired or L is being developed. Also, we would need to have options for the near term for modest improvements to safety and traffic management on K Street, recognizing the challenges that I pointed out earlier in this video. To do that, I wanted to go back to the existing conditions to start the comparison. So again, we have 5-foot sidewalks on either side, 8 foot of parking on either side, and 12-foot travel lanes within the 50-foot right-of-way. One option developed by our engineering team provides two-way vehicular traffic on K Street, so it retains two-way traffic, adds bike lanes, and retains one parking lane. This option improves bike safety for sure, but it does not change the conditions for the other modes, and it does not reduce the number of conflicts at the intersections. This is a good interim option for enhancing bike safety, and the city will need to engage the public regarding the decision to eliminate parking and to add these bike lanes before implementing this. This option is, however, inferior to the proposed gateway plan couplet idea, and it does not meet most of the goals and principles outlined in the plan in this presentation. Another alternative that we evaluated adds a turn lane to the two-way K Street option. This may be required if growth and densification create unacceptable traffic due to turning movements off K Street onto the downtown and gateway areas. This is also considered an interim option, and this alternative also does not address the safety and convenience goals connecting the downtown. In fact, because you're adding that third turning lane, you're actually exacerbating some of the conflict points and making it more difficult to cross and use K Street as a non-motor vehicle. This completes our review of the alternatives considered. Staff and the consulting engineers have proposed the K and L Street couplet because it meets all of the goals supporting the alternative transportation modes, creates a superior alternative for bike and ped safety, and meets the design and development principles for feasibility. The Planning Commission reviewed these alternatives and concluded that the K and L Street couplet should be the policy direction for the Gateway Plan. I hope this review advances the conversation and clears up some misconceptions about what's actually being proposed. In addition, the rationale for the proposal, as well as the alternatives review, along with the Commission's recommendation, are now in one place instead of scattered over several meetings. We hope that this enhances the conversation and provides people the information they need to make appropriate comment on the proposal and the decision makers with the information they need to make final policy decisions. Thank you for taking the time to watch this informational video on the mobility alternatives associated with the Gateway Area Plan, and thank you for your time.